Good evening. My name is Commissioner Wright. At this time, I would like to call the meeting to order. And before we jump into our proceedings, I would like to turn it over to our General Counsel, John Nathalizio.
Thank you, Chair Wright. I appreciate that. We have a kind of first time for this commission. So, Chair, we have to address a couple procedural matters before we begin the meeting. AB 2449 created an opportunity for members of a legislative body to teleconference into the meeting under the Brown Act if there is either just cause, such as a contagious illness, disability, childcare needs, official business, or if there's a physical or family medical emergency. The City Council has adopted a policy which permits commissioners under specific circumstances to utilize the teleconferencing capabilities under AB 2449. In order to use AB 2449, the member of the body requesting to teleconference for either just cause or emergency reasons must make a request to participate remotely as soon as possible, including at the start of the meeting, and the commission must take action on a request to participate remotely. Since we already have the ability for the public to make public comment over the phone, and because we already broadcast our meetings over multiple TV and web-based platforms, we are able to accommodate this request and meet the Brown Act's technological requirements. If the commission approves the teleconferencing, the members who are participating remotely must keep their cameras on for the entire meeting and announce if anyone is over the age of 18 years old and present in the room. Additionally, we will have to stop the meeting if the broadcast is interrupted, and all votes must be done by roll call, which we already do. The broadcast might look a little bit different since we need to keep Commissioner Martz's image on the screen as our overlord for the whole meeting. Tonight, we have one commissioner, Commissioner Martz, who has requested to participate remotely for a physical emergency that prevents them from being present in the council chambers tonight. This is the first time Commissioner Martz has requested to appear for an emergency circumstance under AB 2449. And with the above said, I will need two actions from the commission before we begin. First, we will need a motion to add an urgency item to the agenda to add this request to teleconference under AB 2449. Under the Brown Act, an item can be added to the agenda if the item came to the city's attention after the posting of the agenda and the item requires immediate action. Here, this request was received from Commissioner Martz this afternoon. The item is needed in order for the commissioners to participate in the meeting tonight. There are multiple appeals tonight on the agenda, and the public's business needs to be conducted in a timely fashion. So there is a need for the action to be taken tonight. If the commission can make those findings to add the request to teleconference, then we will need to take a motion and vote. So before we get into the second item, is there a motion to add a urgency item to the agenda, which would be this next item, to consider the request by Commissioner Martz to teleconference under AB 2449?
So moved. Second. Is there any deliberation on this? Roll call?
There can be deliberation, but if there isn't, it can just go to a roll call.
Commissioner Bass is absent. Commissioner Kerpes?
Aye.
Commissioner Martz?
Commissioner Martz wouldn't vote in this.
Okay. Commissioner Topshin?
Aye.
Vice Chair Moore?
Aye.
Chair Wright?
Aye. Motion passes.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So now that's been approved, now the commission must approve the request to teleconference pursuant to AB 2449. And if the commission agrees, you can make a motion and a second, and then the Madam Secretary can take a roll call vote.
What's the motion that needs to be made?
The motion will be to approve Commissioner Martz's telephonic appearance under AB 2449 for a emergency circumstance.
Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Commissioner Kerpes? Aye. Commissioner Topshin?
Aye.
Vice Chair Moore?
Aye.
Chair Wright?
Aye.
Thank you, Chair, and just, sorry, bear with me, there's a little bit more left. Okay, so thank you for getting that procedurally done. Commissioner Martz, before participating, please report if there is any individual 18 years of age or older present in the room with you.
You're on mute.
Commissioner Martz, are you able to hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, yes, I'd like to make a request under AB 2449 for emergency circumstances of my health.
Sorry, Commissioner Martz, they already approved that. I was asking for just confirmation about whether there is any individual 18 years or older or that's present in the room with you.
No, I'm alone.
Okay. And additionally, as just one further instruction, please keep your camera on for the entire meeting. And if you need to take a break, please communicate with staff and we can take a recess.
Sounds good. Just
Thank
going
you.
to connect my headphones, but I'll be listening.
Thank you, Commissioner Martz. According to updated legal requirements, adjustments for tonight's commission meeting necessitate that commissioners who are participating via teleconference must always be visible to meeting attendees and viewers. And these adjustments might impact tonight's WehoTV broadcast and stream. And to facilitate visual meeting participation for teleconferencing participants, the broadcast and stream will use one wide view of the council chambers with teleconference participants displayed on a display within the council chambers. Television staff will be unable to provide close-up shots of individuals and meeting participants during tonight's meeting. While this is not ideal as a viewing experience, this approach maintains adherence to updated legal requirements for Brown Act meetings when there's teleconference participation. All right, thank you for understanding, and we can proceed now with the rest of the meeting.
Wonderful. Alrighty, thank you for instructing us through that, Mr. Nasalezio. Again, today is Thursday, July 27th, and this is a meeting of the Rent Stabilization Commission for the City of West Hollywood. We would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather, currently known as the City of West Hollywood, is the occupied, unceded, seized territory of the Gabrielino Tonga and Gabrielino Keech peoples, and I hope one day we will make atonement for this wrong. And so in reflection, before we do the Pledge of Allegiance, I realize that I've never led it, and so I will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance this evening. So if you will all stand and recite with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, Madam Secretary, may we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Commissioner Bass?
Here.
Commissioner Kerpes? Commissioner Martz?
Here.
Commissioner Topshin?
Here.
Vice Chair Moore? Here. Chair Wright?
Here. All righty, we have quorum. Item number 4 on the agenda is approval of the agenda. If everyone's had a chance to review tonight's agenda with the amendment of the emergency item, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Motion to approve the agenda?
A second?
We have a motion and a second. Madam Secretary, roll call, please.
Commissioner Bass?
Yes.
Commissioner Kerpes?
Yes.
Commissioner Martz?
Aye.
Commissioner Topshin?
Aye.
Vice Chair Moore?
Yes.
Chair Wright?
Aye. Motion passes. Item number 5 on the agenda is approval of the minutes. If everyone's had a chance to review the meeting minutes from the July 13th, 2023 meeting, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
I move to approve. Second.
We have a motion and a second on the minutes. Madam Secretary, roll call, please.
Commissioner Bass?
Aye.
Commissioner Kerpes?
Aye.
Commissioner Martz?
Aye.
Commissioner Topshin?
Aye.
Vice Chair Moore?
Aye.
Chair Wright?
Aye. Motion passes. Item number 6 on the agenda is public comment. While Rent Stabilization Commission values your comments, we cannot discuss items that are not on the posted agenda. This will be your time to address the commission on agenda items or items of general interest under our jurisdiction, and you'll have 3 minutes. Do we have any speakers from the public?
We have one speaker in chambers.
All Alrighty, please state your name and city of residence. You will have 3 minutes to speak.
Richard Maggio, please come up.
That's our 8th member right there. That's our 8th commissioner.
Good evening. Am I on here? I am indeed. Good evening, Commission. I'm happy to be here. I was invited tonight to be here by your new chair, and I think that invitation came because I was a partial mentor. So far doing really well. I could hear you. You know how to enunciate and pronounce. Probably something that you need to know, since 1985, there's only been 2 commissioners that have become chair after only 2 years on the commission, and that is you and me. You are the first chair that has not been vice chair, and so that's your record. So I guess I just have while I'm at it, I'd like to congratulate my 2 old friends, Commissioner Topshin and Commissioner Kerpies. I miss you. We served so many years together. I think it was a combination of 60 years, I think I counted. So it was time, to kind of end it, right? And Commissioner Moore, and of course Adam Bass, I know, and Kaylin, hi. I hope
Hello,
you're
hello.
well. So the only message, when I first became chair, I looked at key words that I really needed to listen to and to express myself with. And they were authenticity, emphatic, and adaptability. And all of those help you to drive your message. Congratulations, I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to talk to all of you again, and I'll be around to greet and talk again one day. Bye-bye.
And thank you so much, former commissioner and my mentor, Richard Maggio. Item number 7 on the agenda is the manager's report. Mr. Jonathan Holub, may we please have a report?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Chair, Vice Chair, Commissioners. Jonathan Holub, Rent Stabilization Manager. I don't have much to report tonight, just that, as you know, you have 2 appeals this evening. We're booked with appeals through the end of August at this point. Nothing new has come in. I'm sure it will. I'm sure you'll have plenty to do throughout the fall. That's really all I've got, but if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Do we have any questions for Mr. Holub from the commissioners? All right, thank you, Mr. Holub. Item number 8 on our agenda are the appeals. So it's time to hear our first appeal tonight. The first appeal before the commission this evening is D4735. Do we have a representative from the respondent and the appellant present?
Yes, both parties are present.
Are they in person or via Zoom?
Both are in person, and then we have a public commenter on Zoom.
Wonderful, thank you. Alrighty, for the parties and the public, the ground rules for our hearing tonight is that first we will have a staff report from our legal counsel, Mr. Natalizio. Then the appellate, aka the landlord, will speak first. You will have 5 minutes to provide your oral argument. You can divide that time between 2 segments, one being to state your case, the other being for rebuttal. When it's time to speak, you will tell me how you want to divide your time, if at all. Second, the respondent, aka the tenants, will speak second. You will have 5 minutes to state your case, and you won't have opportunity for rebuttal. Again, to the parties, when it's your time to speak, be sure to state your name and your city of residence for the record. The appellant will then again state how they want to divide their time, and will proceed with your comments. And just some guidelines regarding presenting your case. Please stay on topic. The information that you share should be relevant to the appeal topic. New evidence will not be considered by the commission. You may only discuss issues that were raised at the hearing or evidence submitted to the hearing examiner. Madam Secretary, do you have any public comments?
Yes, we have a public commenter for item 8A. Will you hear that before the staff report?
What's the preference?
It's up to the chair, really. It's just a parliamentary matter. As long as public comment is heard before deliberation, it's up to you.
Okay, maybe we do the staff report first, and then we'll have the public speaker comment.
Good evening, Chair, Vice Chair, Commissioners. My name is John Natalizio. I am the legal counsel to the Rent Stabilization Commission for the City of West Hollywood. This appeal was filed by the landlord in response to the hearing examiner's decision granting a rent reduction application in relevant part for the elimination of a covered pergola over the front patio. The property is a triplex and consists of units 1031, 1031 and a half, and 1033. Relevant to this appeal, the hearing examiner granted a $14 rent decrease to all 3 units for the elimination of the covered pergola over the front patio. Landlord submitted appeal, which claims that the decision is not reasonably supported by the findings made or evidence in the record. And specifically, landlord only appeals that unit 1031 and a half did not have access to use the front porch where the pergola existed, and therefore the $14 rent decrease was not applicable. Staff finds that there is substantial evidence in the record which supports the hearing examiner's decision. Staff finds that there is no evidence in the record that unit 1031 and a half did not have access to utilize the benefits of the pergola. There's nothing to suggest that the tenant of unit 1031 and a half could not have access to the front porch for recreational purposes. Additionally, evidence in the record reasonably supports that unit 1031 and a half did benefit from the housing services resulting from the covered pergola. Therefore, staff recommends adopting Resolution RSC 23-630. You as the Commission have the power to affirm, reverse, modify, or remand the appealed decision of the hearing examiner. The Commission reviews the hearing examiner's decision under the substantial evidence standard, which requires the Commission to make sure there is substantial evidence that reasonably supports the hearing examiner's decision, is credible and of solid value. If that evidence is found, then the decision must be upheld, even if there is evidence that could support a different outcome. The Commission does not substitute its judgment for that of the hearing examiner or reweigh the evidence. As it relates to questions of law, the Commission applies an independent or de novo standard of review to the conclusions of law. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Natalizio. Are there any questions from actually, let's do the public comment now. Thank you.
Joseph, you can unmute yourself and you will have 3 minutes to speak. Please state your name and city of residency for the record.
Hi there, this is Joseph Lammers. I live in West Hollywood. I live at 1031 1/2. Hopefully there's not too much noise around me. And I believe that the pergola very much is related to and part of one of the amenities of my property, because I'm very, very close friends now with Deb and Nora, who live in 1031. And we used to chat all the time underneath that pergola, and we've actually had dinner together where that pergola was even since then. And because of that, I believe that that there's a good case on why the pergola relates to me, as well as the fact that I used to walk by it every single day on my way inside, especially when the front security gate was still intact, and I had to actually walk that way on my route. There was no option to go through the driveway. And every single day, it made me a little bit more proud of the residence that I lived in, and always kind of warmed up my day. I love bougainvillea vines. I mean, absolutely love them. And I used to it made my day just a little bit happier every day that I would go by it. And as far as me not having access to the front porch, I would also maintain that that's somewhat incorrect because of my friendship with Deb and Nora. I did go onto that porch quite often, and they were always welcoming when I did. I believe that's pretty much the case that I'd like to make on that.
Thank you so much for your public comment. We will first hear from the appellant, which is the landlord. Please come to the microphone if you're in person.
Do I state my name and residency?
Yes, and will you like to take your full 5 minutes or split your 5 minutes?
Just I'll take the whole 5 minutes.
Okay.
My name is Drew Dalton Kramer, and I reside in Los Angeles. I'm the property owner and, well, property manager. And this appeal was made because of the 1031 and 1033 are the front doors that collide with the front porch. The front porch still remains. The pergola had to be removed because of termite damage.
And pardon the interruption, can you speak into the microphone?
I'm sorry. The pergola was removed based on rot, based on the old vine that was growing through it, and also termite damage. So it had to be removed for safety, and it was really wobbly and it was unstable and unsafe. So that was the reason why it had to be removed. However, the porch still remains. The same amenities still exist with that porch being there. And that porch is shaded for more than half of the day. After 11 o'clock, it's all shaded. So the shade aspect of it was not relevant in my opinion. Also, 1031.5 is a standalone unit that is nearly 100 feet behind the front duplex, and therefore I don't believe it's relevant to an amenity for 1031.5. I think that's it.
They still have some time, so I'll note it if they want to take it after.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any questions currently right now? Come back to the podium, please. We have a commissioner that has a question. Commissioner Agassi?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, sir. Just for clarification purposes, Unit 1031.5, there would nothing prevent the tenant, there would nothing prevent the tenant to actually go there and use the patio and enjoy the shade of that pergola. So basically, could the tenant go there, put the chair, and enjoy a cup of coffee?
There's nothing in writing saying he's revoked from using it. Also, but it's not written in anybody's lease that it's provided as an amenity. However, the porch still does exist. It is shaded after 11 o'clock a.m. And the pergola is gone due to the maintenance issue that I mentioned. But it is shared. I wouldn't consider it common space because it's shared between 1031 and 1033, whereas I don't find it applicable to 1031.5 because that's a whole different standalone unit located 100 feet farther back. And he never walked past it. He walks down the driveway, and it's not something that's even in his path of travel. Now, if he has dinner with the other tenants, that's besides the point. But I don't find it applicable to his unit.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Bass?
Yeah, do you have access to our packet? I'm not asking you, I'm asking our staff if you do, because I wanted to have you turn to page 40, one of our exhibits. Is it up there?
This one?
The big packet, yeah. If you could just turn to page 40, it's just a map of the property.
You said
That's
page 40?
40. It should be a map of the property. It looks like this.
Yep, that's the bird's eye view of the property.
Yeah, so where is 1031?
So 1031, I guess if you see,
And then 1031.5 is actually what I was asking about. But
1031.5 is the building at the rear of the property at the top of the page.
so B and C that are marked on here, that's related to 1031, 1033?
Right, so
And
if
then
you see
in the
where
back,
that,
behind the car, behind the fence, behind the yard, that's 1031.5?
in front of the car is the garage, to the left of that is the studio apartment.
That's 1031.5?
1031.5, correct.
Okay, so it is a separate unit that's...
It is separate and standalone, not relevant and connected to the main duplex.
Okay, and were you at the hearing examiner's hearing?
I was.
And was that information presented there?
This picture?
This picture definitely was, because it's here. I
Yeah,
know
yeah,
that,
yeah.
but that was there a conversation about it being a standalone building?
You know, it was, it wasn't brought up because I wasn't aware that it would affect all tenants.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any additional commissioner questions?
I have a question. You mentioned that after 11 a.m. there is shading, but in the picture on page 51, I'm trying to figure out how there is shading and what it comes from.
So that picture on, you said 51?
Yeah, it's this one.
So the sun, at that time of day, the sun would be behind the roof. So it's hitting the backyard and not the front of the property. The front of the property faces east.
Okay,
So it has morning sunlight, but that's it.
okay. And I have one more question. Have you tented the entire building for termites since you took the pergola down?
We've hired Terminex, and they've advised us that tenting wouldn't be necessary because it was a one area issue. But they've put precautionary traps in the ground. They've done other spraying and all precautions for Mediterranean termites as well as dry rot termites.
Thank you.
Any additional commissioner questions, Commissioner? What about you, Commissioner Martz? I see a head shaking no. All right, and I did have a question. So it appeared to be, some conflicting testimony during the hearing regarding what the next steps would be regarding either replacing the pergola or there being no plan for it. So can you tell us what the next step is regarding that structure, if any?
There is not a plan to restore the pergola, just because of the fear of rot and termites returning.
Okay, thank you. You can have a seat now, and I do believe you have some additional time, so if you choose to do a rebuttal after the tenants, you have some time to do so.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All righty, and the respondents, aka the tenants, can now step forward to the microphone. Please state your name and city of residence, and you'll have 5 minutes.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Devlin Watson, and I, along with my wife, Nora McIntyre, are tenants at 1031 Havenhurst, where we have in West Hollywood, where we have resided for since 2010. As in regards to the recommendation by this body, we would highly recommend that this board accepts the recommendation by the staff report. I would like to add that in addition to the pergola and just the outside, we've had our security fence removed, we've had our backyard removed, all in the matter on record. We've had a number of amenities removed, but with regard to the front of the property that benefited 1031 and a half, the pergola and the security fence and the area made it look as though it was lived in, and it was good for safety and security. In fact, since the removal of all of these amenities, we have had trouble with unhoused individuals camping out, and one of the sets of individuals that camped out in the driveway, which impacts 1031 and a half, because 1031 and a half has to exit and enter now through that driveway. And he, in addition to having to get in and out in his safety, had to pass through unhoused individuals that had taken up residence for several hours on one of these occasions. So we would ask that this body takes the recommendation of the staff report and find in favor of the tenants. Thank you. I stand by and stand ready for any questions that this board may have.
Thank you so much. Commissioner Agassi.
Chair, I just wanted to confirm your unit 1031 or 1031 and a half?
Oh, we live in, or my wife and I, Devlin Watson and Nora McIntyre, for the record, live in 1031.
1031.
Yes, we are the longest residents in that in the unit since the Kramers have purchased the unit.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Are there additional commissioner questions for the tenants? Commissioner Martz?
I have none, thank you.
All right, already I had one question. One of the exhibits that you submitted to the hearing examiner was on page 43, and it is a Airbnb ad for the property. Who posted this Airbnb ad? Was it the tenants? Was it the property managers?
It would be the property manager. When the property manager, Mr. Drew Kramer, purchased the property in December, the advertisement went up on his social media page that the Airbnbs were coming soon to the area. Now, the date was incorrect, but he posted that pretty much immediately after the closing of the sale, from our understanding.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
All righty. How much time does the tenant want, should they choose to use it?
The tenant has 3 minutes and 21 seconds, and the landlord has 3 minutes and 15 seconds.
Would the landlord like to do a rebuttal? If not, we'll move on to deliberations.
In regards to the unhoused people, I know it's not pertaining to today's hearing, but we have had a new security fence put in. So the fact that the house, as the tenants say, it looks uninhabitable, our plan is to soon have that resolved. We've had, multiple construction projects, and everything happens in phases. It's not instant gratification. But in regards to the unhoused and the property looking vacant due to the lack of the pergola, I don't think it looks less of a house just because the pergola is missing. But the security fence has been restored, and the gates for the driveway and the pedestrian gate are being installed tomorrow. And we hope to gratify the tenants for adding these amenities that they believe they had previously, add them back.
I have a question for you, and that is, a moment ago when you were standing up here, you did say that you're not planning on rebuilding the pergola, but the statement that you provided in writing to the hearing examiner says, item number 6, it's page 81 of the packet there. I believe that's attributed to you, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it says rebuild the pergola or some other type of porch shade. In writing, you told the hearing examiner you're doing it, but then you're telling us you're not. And then in an email to the tenant, you said that you were not doing it. And that's in our evidence as well. I could get the page number if necessary. Which is it?
We do not have any plans to put up another pergola for the fear of rot, or, as the tenant said, vegetation was in it. The vegetation was actually growing into the pergola, which caused it to hold moisture, which caused the rot, termites, and it also was growing into the roofing material, which caused roof leaks as well. So that is another reason why we are not going to be adding it back.
Thank you. Thank you.
Commissioner Agassi?
He already answered the question. Thank you.
Any additional questions from the commissioners? All right, thank you. Let me take your seat. Alrighty, the testimony portion of the appeals has commenced. Would any commissioners like to kick off the deliberations?
Chair, just wanted to clarify, the public speaker we had before, after the council's report, was it a tenant from 1031 and a half? I think I missed that part when the tenant reported. Do you know?
I'm not too sure. They just.
Okay.
Yeah, it was 1031 and a half was the public speaker.
Public speaker was from 1031 and a half. All right. Thank you. Thanks.
Would you like to kick us off with the deliberations?
Well, yeah, I could. Thank you, Chair. Right. By reading the staff report and reviewing the evidence that was presented to the hearing, and considering the statute, the ordinance that we have before us for the reduction of the common area services, the examiner's determination applying the rent decrease to all units, I think that is a correct decision. I don't think the examiner erred in that determination, because we have a common area service, and the fact remains that the service was removed. So I understand the reasons why the service had to be removed, and I acknowledge the reasons why the landlord had to remove the service. But it is irrelevant to the fact that the service was there, available to all the units, whether the tenants were using them or not using them. That could have affected, excuse me, that could have affected the amount of the rent reduction, which we're not discussing now. But the fact that the service was available to each and every unit, that's the fact. So, because it's a common area service. By that logic, I believe that the examiner's decision was correct. Now, as I said, I'm not gonna speak about the amount of rent reduction. I believe there is no excessive decision in that. It's reasonable. It's supported by the suggested guidelines. So I'm going to affirm the staff's recommendation for this matter. And also, by just taking, looking at the pictures before and after, which is obviously would be irrelevant, as you would probably say, but I can see a huge difference, obviously. So it's not the same service, it's not the same property when you look at the pictures before and after. Clearly, the pergola provided the shade that needed for the tenants, and kind of a sense of security, and the security and comfort and convenience. But I think the examiner's findings were correct in this matter. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Bass?
Yes, thank you. There are several things that concern me with this as I read the entire record. And one of them I raised in the question, and that is that an email from the landlord to the tenant said, we are not going to be rebuilding the pergola. And then the written statement to the hearing examiner said, we are going to be rebuilding the pergola. And then the testimony tonight, we're not going to be rebuilding the pergola. Then the statement also on page 81, the document we looked at, said to the hearing examiner that, I want to quote it here, was purchased with a commitment to improve and enhance the living experience of its tenants. And yet it was posted it was going to be an Airbnb, which is not a living experience for the tenants, which to me is both of those are disingenuous statements to the hearing examiner. That's how I read them. I believe those statements are in conflict, and I don't know how to reconcile all of that. So that leads me to believe that the hearing examiner would be reasonable in taking the tenant's testimony over the landlord's, because there's conflict in the statements being made by the landlord. That being said, as I looked at the maps and I read that part of the hearing examiner's rationale, I'm sorry, I'm looking at my notes so I don't miss anything, that's why I'm not looking up, is that part of the hearing examiner's rationale was that it was a heating and cooling function on the home, and the heating and cooling costs would go up for the tenants, as well as a safety issue for the tenants. But I'm having a hard time reconciling how a building I'm taking the landlord's word, that it's 100 feet behind the building, behind a yard, behind a fence, is going to be impacted for heating and cooling from a pergola attached to the building in front of that. I don't think that there's any correlation on heating and cooling for the completely separate building. And the safety issues, we're all dealing with the homeless issue right now. I don't know that the pergola is would have made any difference on safety issues for the building behind. And so I'm interested in, the reason I asked the question as to whether that came up in the hearing is, did anybody discuss it? But I noticed it in the maps. I don't know that a reasonable person would say that a shading over one building impact the heating and cooling of a completely different building. That's a stretch too far for me that I don't think a reasonable person would get to. I'm interested in what my colleagues have to say. I could be convinced otherwise, but I believe we're lucky that the only issue before us is 1031.5 because it makes it very clear. I think the hearing examiner got it all right on the others. That the other 2 units, that's not before us. But 1031, I think, was a stretch too far. So I'd love to hear what you all have to say.
Thank you. Does anyone want to respond before we move on to Commissioner Callan? Go on. Yes, your deliberation.
But I heard a different name. I have problems with this applying to 1031.5 as well. I look at these pictures and I don't think it's reasonable at all for the person who lives in the back house to assume that they have access to the front other than, being invited or to use it casually in that manner. I do know that our ordinance is pretty clear about common area on the property, because we've had several cases where a hallway that no other tenants would likely use would still apply across the board. But this one where it's not a multi-unit building. I mean, there's a duplex and there's an extra unit in the back, but I find it really hard to stretch that and make it apply to this. So I think the hearing examiner did correctly decide the first 2, or the effect, and it was a loss of service for the front units, but I'm having a tough time as well with connecting the 1031.5 to a loss of service.
Thank you. Commissioner March, would you like to give your comments?
Yes, of course. I am in agreement with Commissioner Topshian here. I think with respect to the other 2 commissioners that have spoken right now are a little bit off base on what our ordinances and regulations require. This is a funky setup, but there's no carve out in our ordinances for funky setups or whatnot. This is the same as a large apartment building that has a pool on one side of the building, or is similar to, it's not the same, and tenants walk far away to get to it. The tenant tonight testified that they use this for socializing. I do think that the pergola did provide some level of security, and I think that was a reasonable interpretation and explanation. And we always have to go back to, it's not what our personal belief is, it's what, if we can find in the record that the hearing examiner had a sufficient basis to make the decision that they did. Whether or not there could be an alternative decision is irrelevant if there's sufficient basis in the record for what the hearing examiner decided. I also have concerns about Commissioner Bass's, not concerns about what you said, what you pointed out, that there's some conflicting testimony from the landlord's representative. It calls into question the credibility of the testimony, and the landlord's representative saying there's no basis for the back to get it. They're not, that's for us to decide. That's not the point of this hearing right now. So I do think that the staff's recommendation is correct and that there was sufficient evidence in the record for the hearing examiner's decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Martz. Commissioner Moore?
Yes, I'm also in agreement, Commissioner Martz. I'm not sure that we should be looking at the direct access on this. This is their front yard, the entire compound's front yard. And when you take a look at that, that is the first point of entry into, people's homes. So for me, I'm not as concerned about the shade as I am about the safety piece of this, which I do think was lost around the entire property. And it wasn't just the pergola. From what I saw, it was all the fencing and stairs and other great quality of life pieces that were always part of this property. So just to see the before and afters and to know that they're not making effort to make that quality of life back to where it was is concerning for me.
Thank you. And I agree. I think the before and after photos were pretty daunting to see sort of the vegetation up front, the pergola, and then to see that all that has been removed and there's, appears to be no plan to remediate that or to sort of bring it back to its glory. I think, Commissioner Bass brings up an interesting point, and I do appreciate, you sort of commenting on that, that there may or may not have been sort of sufficient evidence to substantiate that. I think when I look at it, so I go back to our rent stabilization regulations, section 60041, which sort of spells out what the evaluation factors are that the hearing examiner and that the commissioners are to consider when deciding if a downward adjustment is warranted. And just sort of briefly, the factors that stood out to me was part B2, and it's the relevant significance of the reduced service in relation to the quality of life, safety, health, convenience, and comfort of the tenants. And I think if we're looking at that to see if the reduction or the loss of the pergola affected the life, safety, health, convenience, and comfort of the tenants, I think based on the testimony that we had, that the hearing examiner would have heard at the hearing, both of the tenants testified that the pergola provided shade, privacy, and security, and they followed up with additional evidence showing the photos of the unhomed congregating out front. We didn't get testimony as to whether that existed before, but it appears that based on their testimony, that sort of was a new issue that their property had been experiencing. And I think I'm inclined to agree with their assessment that the building looks a little vacant without all of the bells and whistles that the pergola and the vegetation provided. And so based on that, I am inclined to believe that the hearing officer had, a sufficient evidence presented to them to make the assessment that the downward adjustment was warranted. The facts were pretty cut and dry. The pergola was there and then it wasn't. All the tenants had access to it. And so I do believe that the maximum amount is warranted and that the hearing officer's decision should be upheld. Commissioner Agassi?
I just wanted to, for sort of an educational purposes, the landlord in the testimony mentioned that the service was not provided in writing, and there's nothing in writing that would say that the pergola was the part of the units. Under the West Hollywood Municipal Code, which is the rent stabilization ordinance, there's no requirement for a service to be provided in writing. A lot of tenants may rent a unit without a written agreement and nothing in writing, but whatever is accessible and available to the unit, to the tenant, that would constitute a housing service provided to the tenant for which the tenant pays the rent. So that's the basic kind of understanding and the philosophy that if the tenant pays the rent and has access to the amenities, privileges, services, that would constitute a landlord-provided housing service. So there's no requirement to have that in writing. It's kind of just for FYI. Thank you.
Thank you. And just sort of to add on as well, also looking at the statements that were presented, we got at least 6 statements submitted by the respondents, aka the tenants, where the prior property owner, tenants, prior tenants, neighbors, sort of all attested to certain things sort of existing, the backyard being predominantly theirs, the pergola, et cetera. And so it seems that some of these issues could have been sort of discussed between the landlord and the tenant before these things were done. So that way there would be an understanding, a conversation, that way it wouldn't be a surprise to the tenants that had lived there for quite a while and the landlords who had an idea of what they wanted the property to look like. And that's just a comment. It's not really, a question for anyone. It's just, I think conversation sort of would have assisted before getting to this point before the commission. And I do want to acknowledge that at least 2 commissioners sought to maybe amend the hearing officer's decision, and so I do want to give you all an opportunity to make a motion should you choose to. Oh, Commissioner Marks, sorry. Herpes.
I prefer Wizard of Oz if you could. Just kidding.
I'm not ready to make a motion, but I think that, you know, I don't know the landlord at all, or I don't know the manager at all, but I think that several of us are putting kind of words in their mouth. He answered the question that he was asked. What he told us implied that he is maintaining or like doing other things to better improve the building. He shows us a bunch of, or he didn't show us, he showed the hearing examiner the types of quotes he was getting for various services. So I think we're kind of ganging up on the manager. We don't even know the situation. If we bring it back to the pergola, the hearing examiner, and the only thing that was appealed was the pergola. So the security, even though the pergola may have provided security, the fence and all the other things that are referenced for security are completely outside of this case, and maybe the reason why the tenant in the back felt safer, but that's irrelevant. Was the tenant, I have a question for staff, was the tenant, when I say tenant, I mean 1031 and a half, he wasn't at the hearing, was he? I don't think I saw his name as sworn in at the hearing.
I'd have to check the hearing examiner's decision, so just give me 1 second.
And I know he wasn't the one who filed it, so there was no reason why he had to be there, but. And the reason I bring that up is because that's part of the reason why the conversation wouldn't have come up about that back porch area, because no one was in the room arguing about that. They were arguing about the pergola and the effects it had on the 2 residents that actually do own it and use it. So I think that there was just a lot not brought up in the hearing because I think it's unreasonable to think that that's associated, but I know that others disagree with me, but that's my explanation of why it probably was not brought up in the hearing.
Commissioner Kirby, is the tenant for 1031 and a half did not attend the hearing.
And to your point, the application that the tenants submitted on page 37, it does list the private fenced backyard, the covered front patio with vegetation as a common service. And so before the landlord testified that they didn't have notice that this would sort of be an issue. And so the issue was properly before the hearing officer. I don't know that we received specific testimony regarding that particular item and how it applies to all the tenants. But I don't know that it needed to, since it's listed as a common utility. However, I would be, amenable, and actually I don't know how this would work, because that tenant didn't submit the application. Did they have an opportunity to attend should they have chosen to?
Yes, when there are common area issues for a case, the city sends additional notices out to all the tenants of the building. So if they wanted to attend, they are put on notice that there is a case pending that could affect their potential MAR. But in terms of an actual notice sent out for the hearing date, they're applicants. They're considered co-applicants as well.
Thank you. Is there additional deliberation? Commissioner Bass?
Yeah, the findings of facts in the hearing examiner's decision refers to the pergola as a sunshade at the front of the property. And so I'm hearing the safety conversations, and that's certainly discussed throughout the hearing examiner's decision, but I just, I have lots of friends who invite me over to eat on their patios, and those are not my housing services that I'm entitled to. and even though I enjoy those spaces at my friends' houses. And because this is attached to one building and not another building, I just can't get there. So I can count though, and I know that I'm in the minority on this decision, so I won't keep belaboring the point, and I will wait for somebody on the other side to make a motion. The only other thing I would like to say is I'm not one of the attorneys on this commission, and so offer no legal advice in any way, but just the Airbnb thing just really struck me because, the city has really strict ordinances on that, and the city council's cracking down even more. So just a word to whoever's listening that kicking tenants out for an Airbnb is something the city doesn't stand for.
Agreed. Commissioner Martz?
Thank you. I want to just respond. I hear Commissioner Kirby's comments, and to the landlord, we see a lot of bad landlords. I don't think in this case that's what we're seeing here. So I take Commissioner Kirby's comments to heart there. But there were things in the comments and in the documents that were a little bit concerning to me. Yeah, that's all I have to say on that.
Commissioner Agassi?
I'm just ready to make a motion.
All right, go on.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt the resolution of the Rent Stabilization Commission 23-630, a resolution of the Rent Stabilization Commission of the City of West Hollywood affirming the hearing examiner's decision as to application number D-4735.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Madam Secretary, roll call, please.
Chair, sorry, before a vote, could I request that as a part of that motion, I just want to make a minor change in light of what was discussed tonight. It was staff's understanding that all of the units were located in the same building versus the same property. And so section 4 of the resolution, and then subsection 5 states that since the property is a triplex, all units are located within the same building, that the resolution be amended to say since the property is a triplex, all units are located within the same property.
I make a motion as amended by the legal counsel.
Okay.
We have an amended motion and a second. I see Commissioner Martz's hand up. Did you have a?
Oh, that was for earlier. I will lower that, thanks.
Alrighty, Madam Secretary, roll call, please.
Yes. Commissioner Bass?
No.
Commissioner Kirpies?
No.
Commissioner Martz?
Aye.
Commissioner Topshin?
Aye.
Vice Chair Moore?
Aye.
Chair Wright?
Aye. Okay. Motion passes. Okay, if the parties have any further questions, you can reach out to the Rent Stabilization Division at 323-848-6450 or via email at rsd@weho.org, or you may request an in-person appointment. And that will conclude the appeal on 4735. I would like to take a brief 5-minute break before we hear our second appeal. We are in recess. It is 8:07, and the Rent Stabilization Commission is back in session. The second appeal that we are hearing this evening is D4724. From what I understand, the landlord is via Zoom and the tenants are in person. I will once again just run down the ground rules for tonight so the parties understand what the process will be. We'll first hear from the staff, from our legal counsel, going over the staff report. The appellant will speak first. That is the landlord in this case. You'll have 5 minutes. You can divide that time between your stating your case and your rebuttal. You don't have to, but you have the option. The respondent in this case is the tenants. You will have 5 minutes to speak. You cannot divide your time. To the parties, when you speak, please state the name and city. Please state your name and your city of residence for the record, and then proceed with your comments. Since time is limited, please be sure to keep on topic to the appeal topic that is before us. New evidence cannot be considered by the commission. You may only discuss issues that were raised at the hearing. The Secretary has informed me that there are no public comments, but I do want to give a brief moment to check in and see if anyone else has chimed in to make public comments on this appeal.
No public comments at this time.
Wonderful, thank you. I will turn it over to Mr. Natalizio for the staff report.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair, Vice Chair, Commissioners. My name is John Natalizio. I am the legal counsel to the Rent Stabilization Commission for the City of West Hollywood. This appeal was filed by the landlord in response to a hearing examiner's decision granting a rent reduction application for a landlord's failure to repaint the subject unit. The decision granted a $40 rent decrease. At the hearing, the parties agreed and stipulated that the unit had not been repainted within the previous 4 years, which is the required number under the RSO. However, landlord argued that he was excused from repainting the unit due to the intentional acts of the tenant. Staff will defer to the staff report for analysis regarding each of landlord's arguments. However, in summary, staff is not persuaded by the landlord's position and finds that there is substantial evidence in the record which supports the hearing examiner's decision. Therefore, staff recommends adopting Resolution RSC 23-631. You, as the Commission, have the power to reverse, affirm, modify, or remand the appeal decision of the hearing examiner. The Commission reviews the hearing examiner's decision under the substantial evidence standard, which requires the Commission to make sure there is substantial evidence that reasonably supports the hearing examiner's decision is credible and of solid value. If that evidence is found, then the decision must be upheld, even if there is also evidence that could support a different outcome. The Commission does not substitute its judgment for that of the hearing examiner or reweigh the evidence. As it relates to questions of law, the Commission applies an independent or de novo standard of review to the hearing examiner's conclusions of law. Thank you.
Thank you. The landlord, aka the appellant, you will have an opportunity to speak first. I understand you are on Zoom. Please confirm that you can hear us. Mr. Drambitsky?
Am I unmuted?
Yes, we can hear you. You'll have
Okay.
5 minutes. Do you want to divide that between stating your case and a rebuttal, or would you like to use it all just for stating your case?
Oh, I would like to divide it. 4 minutes, 11 seconds is what I assume would be my presentation, and the balance for rebuttal.
Okay, that's 4 minutes and 11 seconds, and the balance for the rebuttal. Please state your name and city of residence for the record, and you may proceed.
Boris Strabrinsky, my name, City of West Hollywood.
All right, you may proceed.
I'm sorry, thank you. The tenant denied access to the apartment and interfered with the work during preparation of the apartment for painting. Municipal Code Section 17.56.010E and Municipal Code Section 17.44.0403A prohibit such intentional acts of the tenant. The facts are outlined in the copious case file, including my declaration under penalty of perjury. A clear water overflow in the apartment above stained the ceiling. The property owner, in preparation for painting, removed these stains, which must be removed prior to painting as they will show through the paint. During cleanup, the tenant arrived screaming and slamming doors in a rage. She slammed the apartment door on me as I was on the threshold, carrying materials, and barred the door, leaving work materials behind. This was interfering with the work and denying access. The interviewing officer, sheriff, stated, quote, "She is not all there, stay away from her," unquote. The hearing officer and municipal staff have custody and control of the police officer's reports and statements, not unlike a city attorney or district attorney. This was the position of the sheriff representative that I spoke with. The staff failed the hearing officer by not making the sheriff's reports available to him. The police officers were independent witnesses of her lockout and barring me from a retrieval of work materials. A police report by me, which was contended as important by the hearing officer, is not appropriate. Common knowledge is that the district attorney is not prosecuting misdemeanor battery, and the denial of access is not a criminal, but a civil transgression prosecutable only by eviction, which is currently on stay during COVID. Why so many hearings on a paint job? Wow, is that a record? The staff cite Regulation 60038 in charging the penalty. However, here the actions by the municipality and the tenant subverted this rule. The first hearing was held before I was given notice of the hearing, which is not difficult to prove. That's really easy to prove. I prove with copies of the postmarks on the hearing notice. This would have slammed the door completely on my claim. No apology for this third world dictatorship legal maneuver was given. That's clearly subversion by the municipality of the rule. The second hearing was held and the tenant failed to show. That's subversion by both staff and tenant. The rule is if the tenant fails to show, she has to go back to square one for 6 months. The staff subverted by failing to dismiss and enforce this rule. There was additional delay when I contracted COVID from this stress, when this tenant's stove was red tagged because she refused to clean it and I had to clean it. And when she harassed the stove repairman when he had to repair and replace her removal and discarding of portions of the cooktop. COVID is a force majeure. If global warming causes the Pacific Ocean to rise over West Hollywood, delaying resolution, does the rule apply when it's impossible to hold a hearing? Any penalty should be assessed, if any, from the date of final judgment today. It is appropriate she paint her own apartment, which she has done before, in addition to during her own renovations without property owner permission. The property owner has already given her permission to paint her own apartment with an insured and licensed painting contractor, which she can afford. Respectfully submitted, Morris Drabinsky.
Thank you, Mr. Drabinsky. Are there questions from the commissioners? Go ahead, Commissioner Bass.
Mr. Drabinsky, you mentioned that the second hearing that the tenant did not attend, but the hearing examiner's record says the second hearing was noticed for March 8th, and you objected to that because you had fallen ill. Can you tell us when that second hearing that the tenant didn't appear was held?
I'm sorry, could you speak a little louder? I have my hearing aids on, but I didn't hear there was some issue regarding the second hearing.
Yeah, I'll try to speak louder, and forgive me if I shout into the microphone to everybody else. I do want you to hear my questions. In your testimony and in your documents to us, you suggest that there was a second hearing where the tenant did not show. The hearing examiners...
I was the only one present, and you should be able to see that on the records of the city.
Could you please tell us the date for that? Because the second hearing...
I have to go back to this voluminous record and give you the exact date. The hearing officer was a different one from the final hearing officer, and I don't recall, but I'm sure that's part of the record. That should be found in the record. I'd have to go back in the record and look it up. I have my file back here, but I don't think you want me to spend the time at this point. That's something easily available to the staff.
But I've read our entire record and I don't see it, so I was hoping you could point it out to me. Thank you.
Well, maybe it was excluded. I appeared for that hearing.
If you find it before the rebuttal, I'd love to have it, but thank you for trying to answer my question. I do appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Are there additional questions for the landlord from commissioners? I had one. I noticed in your appeal that you signed it Esquire. What area of law do you practice?
Oh, I'm an active member of the California Bar. That's true, and I practice transactional law.
Okay, thank you.
Although I did have a case in Van Nuys, and I got 6 times the last drop dead offer at the insurance company.
Thank you. I don't have any questions, but I did want to comment that the appeal that you wrote is definitely one of the most interesting and creative appeals that I've seen before this commission. And with that, it is now time for the tenant to speak. From what I understand, the tenant is in chambers this evening. All right, you may approach the podium. Please state your name and city of residence. You will have 5 minutes, and please be sure to speak into the microphone so everyone can hear you. Thank you.
Hello, good evening. Promised myself I would do this. Susanna Pineda, 1016 North Crescent Heights Boulevard, Apartment 4, City of West Hollywood. I've been a resident since 1998. I've been dealing with this individual since 1998. It's like having a husband without having a husband. This case is just taking a toll on, I believe, on everybody. I did not attend one meeting because I had to work. I do have to work in the morning. I did attend tonight's meeting, 2 other meetings. So one meeting I did not attend, which is what Mr. Dubinsky said, that's just cause for me not having a case. There's no other tenants in my building. I'm the only tenant there. I've been the only tenant for over 10 years now. I painted my own apartment, I believe in like 2018. Just to not have any issues with Mr. Dubinsky. We've had issues with the upstairs having drainage and plumbing issues and coming into my apartment in my unit where it's bubbling up and there's like bubbles coming up. There's nowhere in the notices or anything like that in the pictures that he's put that have anything to do with this. There's no pictures of the bathroom that we're talking about, which is the main bathroom in the hallway that we're talking about. There's no pictures of the bathrooms. There's no pictures of anything. There's just pictures of whether I'm clean, I'm not clean. Whatever he's talking about is not even got to do with anything. It's got to do with the paint. Has he painted it in 4 years? He has not. The reason I actually proceeded to paint it prior to this is because I don't want to deal with this. And this has started in October, and we are here about, halfway into the year, and it's causing me nothing but just a lot of time, energy, and it's just like unnecessary. So I do appreciate you guys' time. I do appreciate everything you guys are doing. If you guys don't judge on my ruling, I only painted the areas which is the above, the bathroom, the master bathroom, and I mean the master bedroom, which I rent out, and the hallway, and those are the only things that I need to be painted. I never painted anything else, and that's it. So thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Just stay there for one moment. Let me just see if the commissioners have any questions for the tenant. All right, doesn't appear. Thank you so much for coming this evening. I will now turn it back over to the appellant. You have the remainder of your time. Can you confirm how much he has to complete?
59 seconds.
59 seconds, sir. Go on.
Please unmute yourself.
Am I unmuted now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. I think the tenant answered the one question regarding the hearing that she did not attend. She recognized there was a hearing that she did not attend. So I didn't have a chance to go to my file to get the exact date of that, but that was indeed the case. And I don't have anything more to really add to this matter, other than the sheriff representative I spoke to said that the records of the police, as well as their comments, were fully available to the hearing officer just for the asking. No subpoena was necessary. I didn't subpoena the officers who were the only really independent witnesses. My wife was there, but she's not an independent witness. And so the sheriff's representative said that that was available to the hearing officer, and it was not available. So that's all I really have to add on this matter.
Okay, thank you. And your time is also ended. Are there any questions from the commissioners to the landlord before we close the testimony portion? Okay, there are no questions for you, sir. Just we're going to deliberate now, so you'll be on mute, but you'll be able to hear our deliberations. Are there any questions for staff before we begin deliberations? I had a question, more of a procedural. The record does indicate that the second hearing wasn't able to proceed because of the landlord, but based on the testimony, it appears that it wasn't able to proceed because of the tenant having to work. Is there just a process to amend the record so it's accurate as to what happened with the second meeting?
I would just say that outside of the testimony, there's nothing in the record, including the hearing examiner's decision, stating that there was an actual second hearing held. While that may be the testimony tonight, I would just say that that really isn't relevant or determinative of the appeal. And ultimately, the appeal went forward the hearing went forward after a third noticing, and both parties appeared and were fully able to testify and provide evidence. And so to the extent that there's any sort of due process issue, that I think would be remedied with the fact that there was a third hearing. I don't think that there's necessarily a mechanism to go back and essentially amend the decision itself.
Okay, thank you. Do any commissioners want to kick off the deliberations on this appeal?
Oh, go ahead, Commissioner Mark.
Oh, thank you. This is a tough one, but I am in agreement with the staff's recommendation and the hearing examiner. I think we have decently compelling and understandable testimony from both sides, and it comes down to, is there substantial evidence in the record to support the hearing examiner's decision? I think there is. The baseline is that these activities were required, or these fixes were required of the landlord, and they weren't done. To push back on the landlord's statement, it's not staff's or hearing examiner's decision to go out and get police reports. Also, what the DA does or does not choose to file is irrelevant to this matter. You can still file a police report if you so choose, but we can't make decisions based on the what ifs of there might have been a police report, there might have not been, the hearsay of a sheriff's deputy or whatnot. So these are kind of like mini trials. I call them baby trials sometimes in front of the hearing examiner, where you're your own lawyer, you bring a lawyer, you present evidence, and the hearing examiner is the quote unquote judge of the situation. So staff nor the hearing examiner go out and do that work for you. So you bring to the hearing examiner what you want to present, whether it be photos, documents, or testimony, or witnesses. So I think in this case, the hearing examiner was correct, and I would uphold their decision.
Good. Thank you, Commissioner Martz.
Thank you.
Commissioner Kerpes?
Yeah, I would just say I would agree with all of that. And I too, when we deal with the he said, she said, I agree that we need to just fall back on the hearing examiner. And I also kind of feel, based upon the testimony tonight, I'm not quite convinced that the landlord understands that he is responsible for painting. So that's where I'm at. I would support the staff recommendation.
Commissioner Moore?
I support the staff recommendation as well. On page 197, I'm just looking at if a landlord discontinues or substantially reduces a housing service to a tenant without a corresponding reduction in rent, the affected tenant is entitled to a rent decrease pursuant to WHMC section 17.4400. So for me, this is a pretty clean decision.
Thank you, Commissioner Moore. Commissioner Agassi?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think if we simplify the question before us, is there substantial evidence that would support the examiner's decision that the tenant is entitled to receive a rent decrease because of the landlord's failure to repaint the interior. I think if we put it that way, it's very simple. The landlord failed to perform the duty, and that's under the RSO. And it's a municipal code that requires the landlords to paint the units once every 4 years, the interior. It's undisputed that the unit was not painted. Painted 4 years before, whatever the time frame was, I don't remember when was the last time it was painted. But the fact remains that the tenant is entitled to rent decrease. So I don't see any relevance of that examiner not obtaining the police report. I think it's a completely irrelevant even discussion regarding this case. And also the MAR's, the determination of the MAR, although the reduction in rent that will affect the MAR, but this is not within the scope of this case or appeal to look into the calculations of the MAR determination. So I agree with staff on that matter, and I also agree that there are no discretion. The examiner did not abuse the discretion on the by not including the agreements made during the hearing, and also regarding the decrease date, which is December 1st, 2022. So based on that, I think the staff's recommendation is correct, and I'm going to support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Bass?
Yeah, I don't want to echo what my colleagues have said, but so I'll say I agree. But I want to expand on it and say I'm surprised that the rest of the building is empty, and it sounds like it has been for some time, and that the argument made here is that it can't be painted because it's dirty or there's stuff on the walls or things like that. The code says you'll paint the apartment every 4 years. It also says, and I wrote this down so I'd get it right, the landlord is responsible for all acts reasonably necessary to the performance of maintenance required by this section, including but not limited to the reasonable movement of furniture. So if there's something in the way, the code says it doesn't matter, you move it. If there's something on the wall, you take it down. It borders for me on landlord harassment of a tenant when the arguments are that the tenant is dirty or the tenant has something on the wall. The whole building is vacant, this sort of stuff. So none of that's before us, but it concerns me, and so I'm raising it. But what it comes down to is the unit has to be painted every 4 years. It doesn't matter all of the other stuff, it's noise. Has it been painted in the last 4 years? No. There's no record here that the tenant has stood in the way. There are allegations, there is no proof, there is no evidence, there is no document, there is no nothing, and the landlord had 3 hearings, and this hearing here today, if there was a reason he couldn't bring it up in previous hearings, to provide that evidence, never did. This is easy. I would support staff's recommendation.
Thank you. Of the copious arguments that the landlord presented, I think the one that could have been, the more compelling was that there had been some tenant interference, and indeed that's really one of the only sort of reasons not to do it that the regulations sort of identify. But the landlord did not provide any evidence that the same testimony, was presented to the hearing officer, who made a determination based on credibility that it was, based on credibility to go with the tenant who said that didn't occur. And so with that, I think I am certainly in agreement that it's pretty cut and dry that the landlord had a duty to paint the apartment every 4 years, with the caveat or sort of an asterisk that this isn't the first time that this issue has been before the commission, albeit a separate commission, where the landlord has not painted it. I believe before, a few years back, the tenant had then also testified that they went ahead and painted it themselves because it wasn't. And so this certainly isn't, new information for the landlord. And so I think really the only issue that I sort of have pause about is the amounts of the reduction. The guidelines provide a range between $40 and $120 for failure to paint the interior of an apartment. The hearing officer decided on 40, which is the bottom of that valuation guide, with no real indication as to why that was it. The things that I've been able to glean based on the conclusions of law and the hearing officer decision was that it was based on issues raised, the record supports it, and the other comment was that the adjustment was warranted given the time frame the unit hadn't been painted. However, again, based on this not being sort of a new issue, I would have liked a more in-depth analysis of the valuation guidelines. There are about 7 for the hearing officer to have opined on regarding the effect of the reduction, the significance of the service of the tenant, habitability, et cetera, throughout all of the factors that are listed in the regulation 60041. I don't know if there is sort of appetite or with the commission to discuss sort of our analysis of it. From what I understand, this is a question of law, at least that's how it is listed in the decision, that the amount was a conclusion of law. And that standard, the commission can review de novo. And so I would be interested in having that conversation. And so I would ask the commission if they are open to discussing, increasing the amount. I don't have an amount in mind, but 40 just sort of doesn't seem sufficient. I think sort of especially based on the appeal from the landlord, on page 193, there's a lot of, and then it's the last 2 paragraphs of the appeal where the landlord is essentially saying that he's prejudiced by the tenant not honoring her commitment to paint the building, that, that she didn't prepare the service. If she doesn't do it within 5 days, the decision should be in the landlord's favor. And also putting the duty on her to hire a licensed contractor with proof of liability, workers' insurance. And to end it, he grants her permission to paint the interior of the apartment with a license, by a licensed contractor. And so I think all of that to say, I would hope that the landlord sort of gets this done. And again, I know the valuation guidelines sort of aren't punitive, but I think sort of based on the history of these parties, I would like to see a higher valuation.
Chair, if I may, I think the points you're making are valid, and the critiques of the decision is fair. I would just say that I don't think that the valuation is part of the appeal in the sense of the landlord or the tenant isn't saying the valuation was improper. For example, the tenant isn't saying it should have been $100 versus 40. So I would just say that I don't believe that valuation would be a part of this appeal. And again, as last meeting, if the commission disagrees, you are free to do that, but that would be staff's position.
So I'm trying to find my place. If anyone else wants to make a comment while I find what I wanted to say to that in response to that.
I'll go ahead. I would concur with staff's decision. I hear what you're saying, Chair, but I think staff's position is correct. Kind of like what we talked about at the last meeting, I think they've waived that and that it's not before us tonight, so I wouldn't want to kind of dive into that because that is not what the appeal was about in my eyes.
And so looking again, sort of back to the, I guess, the 5 pages of the appeal document that we have, there is conversation regarding the valuation. It's sort of a roundabout way. Again, it's page 193. It's the second to the last paragraph where the landlord is sort of saying he's prejudiced, by the amount and by the delay and not performing the duty. And in my understanding, and actually also on page 192, there's comments from the landlord, says decision 1 of the hearing officer report with the $40 rent reduction, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think it is before the commission. I think it's rightfully, sort of based on the appeal, based on the discontent with the amount that was endued granted. But without the votes, it doesn't matter. So if there's no appetite here, I'm certainly open to hear comments, and if not, we can move forward.
I'm just curious because I'm new, but how does that even work? Are we allowed to make that decision, or would it go back to the hearing officer to make that determination?
Are you talking about for valuation?
Yeah.
So generally, if it is appealed, valuation is within the commission's jurisdiction to either reduce or increase the reduction. Again, if it's part of the appeal.
Or remand still is an option, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Chair?
Commissioner Hesse.
I've always been in favor of the commission to exercise that right to, when it's necessary, to look into the evaluation and change the amount of decrease determined by the hearing examiner when we believe that the amount is unreasonable. But it has to be something in the appeal that would show the tenant or the landlord disagreed with the amount, so that would trigger that discussion for us to exercise our right, the jurisdiction that we have to change the amount. I said I always open for that, and I don't like really remanding cases back to the examiner if we disagree with the amount. If we could say it's not 40, but let's say $70, and everybody agrees on that, why do we need to send it back to the remand to the examiner? So I usually like when the commission exercises that right under the law. But I think in this particular case, I would agree with the legal counsel. I don't believe we can really do it now for this particular case, and I'm not really sure I can support that idea, although I liked it.
Sure. And so my proposal would be, again, the range is 40 to 120. I would propose an $80 MAR. And again, just sort of reiterating, I think the issue is before the commission. The landlord appealed opening up this specific issue regarding painting, et cetera. And so I think it's rightfully before us, should we choose. My proposal would be for 80, and I'm interested in, I've heard from Commissioner Agassi, if anyone else has an opinion, yay or nay, so we can proceed. Commissioner Bass?
I would say it's before us. The $40 amount's mentioned multiple times throughout the appeal narrative.
Thank you. Okay. All right, I will, Mr. Nestelizio.
Sorry that you have to hear me again. The only position I would just say is that the appeal is that the hearing examiner erred in granting any rent decrease. I think the landlord's position is there should be a zero decrease, and what the commission is potentially discussing is increasing it. And I think the problem that happens there is, well, then now the hearing or the landlord's going to go, well, I also would have addressed, for example, that $80, I would have appealed that too, because I think that that's too high, and essentially that creates now another appealable issue that can't be addressed. So I would say that if the commission ultimately wants to consider valuation and finds it is a part of the appeal, perhaps what Commissioner Kirby's talked about, a remand would at least afford the parties an opportunity to address it. But again, my position would be that if in every landlord appeal, they're inherently discussing the price, it can't be that every appeal allows the commission to change the valuation. It would have to be specifically addressed that. And generally this would be from the tenant's perspective, that it's too low and that it should be higher. And while that is rare, this commission has, at least since I've been here, heard cases where the tenant has appealed saying it's too low, and then the commission has increased it. So that's my position. Again, I'm just a staff's recommendation.
I don't think it has to be as sort of wide-ranging as, every appeal, this could happen, et cetera, if it's reopened. I think it was a contention that was made in the appeal. I think it's properly before us, and indeed we have the ability to, and the power, sort of based on the relevant law. And I think we wouldn't be here had the decision actually gone through any of the factors that are listed in the valuation guideline. That way we'd have sufficient support behind how we reach that number. And so, the effect of the reduction, significance of the service, habitability, market value of the service, I think that one is specifically relevant here, the market value of the service not being provided. And so, if it indeed turns on the tenant having to do this service, et cetera, I think we have to look at the value of what it would cost to paint an apartment, the reliance of the tenant, the MAR, other relevant factors, et cetera. We also can look at the square footage and the replacement cost based on the regulations. And so I don't see any additional comments, so I will make the motion. Oh, I see Commissioner Martz. Go on.
Yes. Just two brief things. I would have to vote no on this, even though I believe in the tenant's rights here, and I support the hearing examiner's decision. I don't think this is properly before us, so I would have to vote no. If we did do a remand, we just have to keep in mind that this would kind of delay the process for the tenant. So those are just my 2 cents.
Yeah, I wouldn't be in favor of a remand. I think this, the tenant testified it's the 4th time, 5th time potentially that they've had to sort of do this process. I see Commissioner Kirby's go on before I make my motion.
Yeah, I think that you bring up a lot of valid points for what the tenant is going through and the costs and all that stuff. I just don't see that this is in front of us tonight. And the tenant did have an opportunity to appeal the decision, just as the landlord did. So I don't see this as an issue in front of us. The dollar amount, I mean. And I would not be in favor of taking it up or even referring it back to the hearing examiner like I usually do.
Okay, I would like to make a motion that we adopt the resolution
Chair.
23631 with the amendment increasing the valuation from $40 to $80, and the remainder of the decision being affirmed. Is there a second?
A second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there deliberation?
Did I see legal counsel wanted to say something?
No, what the chair did was fine. I was just going to ask, before doing a motion incorporating the valuation change, if you just wanted to do kind of like an informal poll to see if the commission found that the valuation was a part of the appeal, but this is also one way to get to that.
Okay, I just wanted to hear what you had to say before voting. Thank you.
Thanks for catching that. I missed it. And I see Commissioner Marx's hand up. Do you have deliberations
No,
on this?
that was from before.
Put your hand down. Madam Secretary, roll call, please.
Yes. Commissioner Bass?
Aye.
Commissioner Kirpies?
No.
Commissioner Martz?
No.
Commissioner Topshin?
No.
Vice Chair Moore?
Yes.
Chair Wright?
Yes. And the motion passes.
I think as 3-3, the motion doesn't pass.
I had 4-2.
The 4-2.
It's 3-3. Topshin, Kirpies, and Martz are the no's.
It was 3-3.
And the motion doesn't pass. All righty, so the parties can, so the hearing, I guess we need a motion. Is there another motion regarding this item?
I would move resolution number 23631 as presented by staff.
I would second that.
Madam Secretary, we have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Yes. Commissioner Bass?
Yes.
Commissioner Kirpies?
Aye.
Commissioner Martz?
Yes.
Commissioner Topshin?
Aye.
Vice Chair Moore?
Yes.
Chair Wright?
No. And the motion passes. If the parties have further questions, you can reach the Rent Stabilization Division at 323-848-6450 or by email at rsd@weho.org, or you can request an in-person appointment online. For the parties who joined via Zoom, you will now be placed back into waiting room, but you are free to attend the rest of the hearing via the waiting room or go online and watch it via YouTube. Item number 9 on the agenda is new and or unfinished business. Mr. Holub, do you have a presentation for this item?
We have no new business. There's items from staff, though, coming up.
Alrighty, items from staff.
So the commission asked for a list of the liaisons that were picked last meeting, so that's being presented to you. I don't know if you want to add to that. I think it's fine if you shoot up in the middle of the night and decide you want to be a liaison, and you can email me, and I'll make sure that happens. Yeah.
And it's page 289 in the agenda.
Thank you.
All right, is there additional items from staff?
Nothing else. Thank you.
All righty, any public comment, Madam Secretary?
No public comments for tonight.
All righty, wonderful, keeping it moving. Item 12 are items from commissioners. Do the commissioners have any comments, adjournment motions, or reports from their liaison assignments? And I see Commissioner Martz.
Yes, I just want to briefly thank everyone for allowing me to Wizard of Oz in tonight, and for staff for explaining that to the commission and getting that all set up on last minute notice. And then a kudos to Chair for your first full meeting. You've done wonderfully.
Thank you. Commissioner Bass.
I just want to apologize to everybody for being late. I would have been right on time, but all the parking spots in the entire structure were filled, went all the way to the top, and luckily somebody pulled out as I was on my way back to the bottom. So I try very hard not to be late, but I was today, and I apologize.
You were just in time to miss the emergency motion, so Commissioner Moore.
And you did not miss roll call. So I just wanted to say congratulations on your first full meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner Kerpes. And I do want to apologize to you. I've called you every name, I think, except for your name this evening.
That's okay.
I think my brain just shut off.
I was just
with
very
the nerves.
confused in the beginning, that's all. I wanted to politely suggest to Commissioner Bass that maybe he'd go car free and he could get here on time like I did. And then, of course, Chair, you did an amazing job tonight. We had two long and complicated cases, and you kept your cool the entire time, so great job.
Thank you. Commissioner Agassi?
Just want to say congrats with the first meeting. Very productive, very, you've done a great job with that. So just congrats for that. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. And I just have one announcement. National Night Out is coming up on August 1st. The city has already posted all of the sort of events per neighborhood. I think it's about 9. There's the block party in the Gateway. There's a barbecue on Kings Road. There's a block party and a potluck on Harper Sweetser. West Hollywood East has a circus theme event. Cynthia Sunset has a potluck. West Hollywood Russian Advisory Board has a block party. The West Hollywood West Resident Association also has a block party. The Recreational Division has movies in the park from 6 to 10. And the Heights neighborhood has a Mexican fiesta. It can all be found on weho.org. So make sure you participate in all of the amazing events we have going on August 1st. And with that, this meeting is adjourned to the next regularly scheduled meeting of the Rent Stabilization Commission to be held on August 10th, 2023 in the West Hollywood Public Meeting Rooms Council Chambers. Good night.
Good night.